Hi everybody, thank you very much for joining us. My name's Frances and I'm the one that's been coordinating and sending emails and the Zoom links, etc. We'd like to thank you all very much for your interest in Erasmus Courses Ireland and for this very insightful and enjoyable webinar that Rachel is going to present to you. So I'll finish off at the end. So I know that you're all very busy, and for some of you, you're an hour later or maybe 2 hours later from Ireland. So I'm going to hand you over to Rachel Fionda, who's the training and program coordinator from Erasmus Courses Ireland. She's been a teacher trainer and teacher for over 20 years. So you're in good hands here, and we've gone through the webinar. So there you go, Rachel, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I am going to keep it to about 20 minutes because I know how busy teachers are and it's quite late in most places. That's allowing for some questions at the end as well. So let's make a start. We're going to look at learner engagement today through three kind of different lenses. And roughly, it's kind of the start of the lesson, what happens in the lesson, and then a little reflection at the end. And I'm also going to tell you a little bit about my school. So there's my school, first of all. It's a beautiful school in Dublin. So a little bit about me first. So Rachel Fionda, I'm actually from the UK, from not too far where Frances is from. But I've worked in ELT for over 25 years. I do not know how that has happened. Once I trained in England and did my first summer job there, I then taught in Germany, Italy, Austria, and then ended up in Ireland, where I am today. Now, as well as my undergrad, I also have an MPhil in applied linguistics and a PhD in applied linguistics. So you can tell I really love this area. I also love languages, but believe it or not, I don't learn languages very well. I'm not a natural, and I'm not sure I believe in that term. I was rubbish at languages at school. Anybody else? Can anybody else give me a kind of a hands up if they were rubbish at languages at school? I keep my eye in the chat box. Oh, yes, a few. And so all the languages that I have the privilege of speaking today, I learned as an adult. So that really informs when I train teachers who teach adults. I've been there, I know what it's like. So I speak German reasonably well, thanks to my German husband. I speak Italian reasonably well, that was my undergrad. And I'm since learning Norwegian. Anybody else speak Norwegian? Sorry, I'm just keeping my eye on chat. If I look over there, it's because I'm looking at chat. Okay, hello from Italy. Okay, lots of two languages. Hellos there. So yeah, I love learning Norwegian. That's my latest thing. So let's move on. So first of all, today really is about looking at things kind of from a different angle, a different perspective. And that's what I want to give to you today. I will give you some practical takeaways as well. And I'll throw in just a little foundation of research, but mainly I just want you to enjoy this and for it to inform your practice and make a difference afterwards. So first of all, I want to start by asking you, think about the last time you felt deeply engaged as a learner. You can, if you have your camera on, you can turn your microphone on or press and type something into chat, but you don't have to answer this to me really. You can even close your eyes and think about the last time you felt engaged and that flow as a learner. What was happening in the room? And perhaps most importantly, what was happening in you? Now, as I said, I'm not expecting you to give me all of your answers, because what usually happens when I ask this question is there's not particularly a pattern. It's very different. When I think of the last time I was engaged as a learner, probably about 10 years ago, I did a coding course online when MOOCs first became available and freely kind of popular. I'm not technical, I'm a linguist. I don't know anything about coding, but I thought it's going to be important for my kids' future. Same time, I signed up for a course in fairy tales. And I'm really interested in fairy tales and the history of them and how they kind of weave in moral tales and the history of Europe. I thought I'd be more interested in the fairy tales. I was far more interested in the coding course. And when I look back now with what I know about pedagogy, it's because the trainer linked the coding course to us. She made it relevant to us. She spoke to us. The fairy tale course kept the knowledge over here. So we couldn't quite touch it and interact with it. But listen, everything I say at every stage is going to be picked up at the subsequent stages of this presentation. So just have a little check at the chat box. And yeah, just keep thinking about how you feel when you're engaged. Because it's not that the teacher had a whole load of tasks that really just kind of grabbed you. I think it's something more than that. So this presentation isn't going to be me giving you my top 3 kind of tasks that I do with learners that make them feel engaged. It's about connection and it's about reflection. Because I think if you've got those things, what you produce from that will be much more engaging and land better with your learners. So please, I'm keeping my eye on chat. You can put your hands up at any point with any questions. Okay, so somebody learned Portuguese and was exhausted. But yeah, that's, learning languages is exhausting for some people more than others. Okay, so let's start at the beginning of the learning journey, which I always emphasize starts with your intended learning outcomes, sometimes called ILOs. Not everybody works with those. Not every curriculum works with those. A lot of people I work with skip over them and ignore them and think it's unnecessary admin. Hands up anybody who thinks of the ILOs as kind of a bit you skip over and they're unnecessary admin. Because I know lots of teachers who think that, when actually they're not admin, they're anchors. The ILOs are anchors that connect the teacher and the learner through a shared perspective. They connect past knowledge with what's coming. So they let the learner think, okay, hang on a minute, we're doing this today. What do I know before? Or what have I learned before? Or what do I already know that has some kind of link with that? This is called schema activation. And if you're not activating schema, your learner isn't learning. But I'll go into that in a little bit more detail. And then they connect intention and reflection by making the learning visible. If you show the learner their target, it's like when you're like using Google Maps. If you're just following Google Maps, that would feel so uncomfortable. If you know where you're going to end up, you can put up with all the twists and turns. So as well as being anchors, they connect intention and reflection by making the learning visible. And again, I'm going to pick up on that a bit later on. So I hope this is all making a little bit of sense so far. And like I said, feel free to type anything in the chat box. I have it open over there. And I have some of you right here. And if you want to sit back and just relax as well, that's also fine. I just want to make sure I've not skipped forward too much. Okay, yeah, so the next slide talks about what an ILO is. And this is such a simple one, and I'm sure you all know this, but it's always good to remind. So SMART ILOs: specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, so that's that relevant to what they need to be learning and what's interesting for them, and time bound. So if I go into a lesson and I see today we're going to understand the present perfect, I think, well, that's not specific. How on earth would you measure that? Is it really attainable? Is it relevant to the students? Like, for example, I never think of grammar when I'm talking to somebody, do you? And it's not specifically time bound. So kind of a little cheat sheet of what ILOs are and are not is they do not cover the grammar focus. Is that new for a lot of people? Are you used to saying, well, this is a lesson on irregular past tenses, tense forms? Are you used to saying that? So that's something I'll explore in a minute. They're also communicated to the student at the start of a lesson for a whole host of very research-backed reasons. I mentioned some earlier, giving them a target, you're activating schema, you are connecting much more with my next point, you're providing clarity for students who are neurodiverse or have a learning difference. So for me, student engagement really does start at the start. The ILOs are incredibly powerful. Hold on, I'm just going to find this out. So the ILOs really do create a communicative context. So what do I mean by that? So for example, just go back to you. Imagine you're catching up with an old school friend. When you're maybe walking to the cafe where you're going to meet them, I don't know about you, but I'm not thinking, right, we're going to talk about what's been happening the past few years. Yep, it's going to be a mixture of the past simple and the present perfect. What are the irregular forms of that again? I'm not thinking that on the way to meet that old friend. What am I thinking? I'm thinking, what do I want to communicate? What do I want to ask them? I'm thinking I must tell them that I caught up with Jennifer from school as well. I'm thinking that I want to tell them that I switched jobs 5 years ago. I'm thinking I want to ask them how it went with that guy they were dating last time. So I'm thinking all of these things. So how does that translate to the classroom? One of the best lessons I've seen recently was a very low level of English speakers. And you'd kind of think maybe, you have to do lots and lots of very controlled practice and lots and lots of grammar drilling. It was an excellent, wonderful, warm teacher of ours. And he basically set up a communicative context. So the ILO was something like learning how to have phone conversations. I think it was in a couple of different contexts. The students could not stop speaking. They were extremely low level. He'd written some scaffold sentences on the board. Once they got going, I think when I'm doing a lesson observation, it's probably a good lesson if I'm not writing anything down because the students are so deeply engaged. All I write is students engaged, and then that goes on for 50 minutes. So that's a really lovely example of what an ILO should do. It should create a communicative context. And another thing, I'll mention this now, but I could mention this at any point during this. I know how teachers are extremely busy. What I try and do whenever I write a course, a program, a training session, a new curriculum, I try and lighten the teacher's load. So I teach them with ILOs, I teach them ways to create really powerful ILOs that really they can spend a lot of time on. So they're not having to create 12 different tasks to try and keep the students on their toes. They're creating 3 or 4 very logical, deeply integrated tasks that really flow on from the ILOs. The time saving. So let's have a look at this. These are some ILOs that I worked with my team with. So they came from a textbook and it was all very, we're going to look at the present simple today and we're going to look at question form. We're going to look at adjectives. Whereas I was like, let's turn that on its head and create communicative context. So what we agreed, I won't do this with you guys now, but what we agreed with, these ILOs are much easier to create a lesson plan from. A lesson plan, an engaging lesson plan, stems much more easily from these kind of ILOs. So, and I'm sure any of you could even look at the first 2. Ask and answer basic questions about places in your town or city. Describe places in a town or city using simple adjectives. Immediately, like let's say everybody's forgotten their course book, the tech isn't working. You could probably still do a full lesson on this, a paperless lesson. You could think of some really simple things that all you have to do is make sure they link to these. I'm not saying you would do all of these ILOs in one day. This might be a week's worth. But they really anchor the lesson and they let the student know where we're going. Is that okay so far? Now, I could talk about any one of these topics for hours, so I'm going to try and wrap this up here so that we've got time for the next 2. So clear intended learning outcomes do more than organized teaching. They create purpose. And for a whole host of research-based reasons, I do have one reference there that you can look up. But when learners know what they're working towards and how it connects to real use and how it connects to the tasks that they're doing, engagement increases. Donier and Ushioda, of course, kind of huge names in motivation. I say that context-rich communicative outcomes increase willingness to communicate and increase classroom participation. So we know that that's what we all want. And I've often found that sometimes, because ILOs are a great way to activate schema, to get the brain going, to get those synapses firing away, ready to make new connections, sometimes I look back and think, why didn't that lesson land? And it was probably, I should have gone right back to the foundation. Okay, I'll move on because time is passing. I'm happy to talk about any of these things when we at the end. Okay, so now let's leave behind the foundation and go on to how do we maintain that momentum when students are when students are working with the tasks that you provide them with. Now, I'm calling this task engagement in UDL, which is Universal Design for Learning, because I want to look at task engagement now from the perspective of inclusivity. So I'll go into Universal Design for Learning a little bit before we look at what that means for engagement. It's my favorite season. Who else loves autumn? Definitely my favorite season. So this is a pavement. Hang on, let's see if I just close this chat box. And I think you can see that big kind of circle. It's called sidewalk in American English, if you're more familiar with American English. What on earth does a pavement have to do with engagement in the classroom? I'm not going to ask you to answer that. I'm just going to take a sip of tea while you reflect. Okay, so basically, hold on, I'll go back. I'll tell you the story first so you don't read that. I think it's about 4 decades ago now, and I'm pretty sure it's in Chicago. So city planners noticed that if you drop the curb, so rather than having a curb like that, if you drop the curbs, it's kind of like a ramp. It makes the city more accessible for wheelchair users. But, and here's the key thing about universal design, it's not just wheelchair users who benefit. Parents with a buggy, somebody with a shopping trolley, kids on a bike, somebody delivering a fridge freezer to the apartment next door, somebody getting their shopping delivered, somebody has just broken their leg, somebody's having a really tiring day. It opens up, so people with wheelchairs benefit enormously, but then everybody benefits at least a little bit. So like city design, universal design for learning, so when you employ certain techniques that I'll go into in the classroom, it's like a dropped curb or ramps in city design. It's kind of designed to make it more accessible, maybe for a certain small group, but it ends up helping everybody move around more freely towards that learning destination, towards that target language. I really like working with UDL and inclusivity. I used to do separate seminars on it. Now I weave it into everything, because when you're looking at engagement in the classroom, between 10 and 25% of the people in front of you have a learning difference, are neurodiverse, or just going through a really tough time. And so they benefit from it, but so does everybody else. I think the key, like a really key perspective in realizing and acknowledging that learning differences and differences in how we perceive the world, for example, if you are neurodiverse, I think you just need to kind of realize that and really absorb it to be able to empathize with the student and understand that they do see the world differently and how they engage may look different. So for example, my son is autistic and he won't make eye contact. And I had to learn that that doesn't mean he's not listening or being respectful. You might have somebody who likes to zone out every now and again, because as you'll see from this video I'm going to show you, the world feels bigger and scarier and louder to them than it does, say, to me. So you've got to allow all of these things. Student engagement doesn't just mean everybody sitting there and looking up at you and going, yes, God, that's great. Can we have the next question, please? It looks different for everybody. And if you're engaging everybody, you have to allow for that difference. I'll just show you a few minutes of this video. This is a shopping centre. This is a little boy in a shopping centre. But I think it's quite relevant and applicable to the classroom, especially if you've got a loud classroom or busy school, and it's quite applicable to adults as well. Can anybody not hear that?
Six, 7, 8, 9. Take my hand. I'm not naughty. I'm autistic.
So I find that video incredibly touching. And I often have that in the back of my mind when I'm thinking of maybe a student somebody's struggling with. So we teach young learners and adults. I'm not sure what your student profile is, but it's relevant to both. If you have a student who does find it difficult to make eye contact, or you saw when the little boy was counting, if you have a situation where there is somebody who's faffing, fiddling with something, clicking their pen, chewing their pencil, and it kind of annoys you, you think that might be their coping technique to center themselves for a minute. So I think, like I said, one of my big messages about student engagement is it's not just about everybody sitting there looking engaged. It might look very different for different people. As you can imagine, this is a huge area. So let's move on a little bit and look at the fundamentals of universal design for learning. So the first kind of tenet, the first block is engagement. So that I'm going to link that back to the first part of my presentation where I talked about the ILOs. So making the target really obvious, opening up to the student. Sometimes you can negotiate the ILOs with the students, and using the ILOs to really activate schema. Ideally, the ILOs are somehow of interest to the students or relevant to them. I observed a lesson recently where two or three students had to do the course book, and it was a lesson on Messi, and I kind of thought these students that don't care about Messi at all, they're not football fans. So how can we then engage them using universal design for learning theories? It could be that we make it about a sports personality they like, could be about a sports experience they had when they were little. Maybe they like dancing instead. So kind of they're a hero that means something to them. So engagement means making sure the students are spoken to, that it's relevant. Representation means making the input flexible and variable. So we've tried to spark their interest and get them engaged and interested at the start. Now it's about how you give the information to the students. So if you're very course book led, and course books, might have 10 or 12 questions on one page, can you kind of just forget some of that and say, right, we're going to watch a video instead. We are going to listen to an audio. Just make sure you're doing different things, that you're catching everybody some of the time rather than just some people some of the time. And then the next step is action and expression. So how can the learners show you what they've learned. So we've got the starting block, kind of try and get them interested. We've got the actual core of the lesson, what they need to learn. So you're teaching them that in different modes. And then you've got, how do they show you their learning? So if it's, okay, I've got to, everybody has to do a presentation. Well, do they? Can some people write it down instead? Can some people draw it? Can some people write a role play for somebody else to act out because they love writing, but that person loves speaking? How can they show, like, what flexibility can you give the learners to show you what they're learning in a way that's comfortable for them most of the time? That creates safety in the classroom, which, guess what, also increases engagement. Kind of put together a very short like checklist. So like I said, if you want to go back, if you're teaching immediately after, I know it's too late for you all, or if you're teaching first thing and you want to put some things in, I've tried to include these little kind of touch points throughout here so you can see how you can apply it to your next lesson. So activate schema. I've used that term. I try and avoid techie kind of academic terms where possible. This is a really good one if you Google it and have a look and get some more ideas. Variety of task types. Give students choice in how they communicate their learning to you, and make the learning visible, which is what we're going to look at next. Is everybody still with me? Okay. I'll just have a look at this very quickly because I'm talking for far longer than I said. But if this was a lesson I was giving a student, I might then ask them to either write a sales advert for something they're trying to sell. I might get somebody to act out an advert trying to buy something, and I might activate schema by saying what's the last thing they bought from an ad, rather than just going straight into this. We won't spend a lot of time on this. So in sum, engagement, representation, and action, plus sticking to the ILOs, displaying what they're going to do, giving the students choice, and a good one is time. And just check in. Okay, somebody just said you're silent but interested, which is good. Thank you. Okay, so reflection. Now, I've actually kept this part really short because remember I said at the beginning, I like to take the weight off teachers' shoulders where I can. And I've given you my absolute, like, and I did, there's a whole load of research into this. This comes from metacognition. You don't need to know any of this. You're about to see my cheat sheet that if you were literally teaching after this lesson, you can use this. And it's actually incredibly powerful. So it's about reflection, really kind of encourages you and the learner to make the learning visible. So if at the end of a task or a lesson or at the end of a week, all you do is this, you've already increased the depth of learning and engagement by a great percentage. I don't know what the research says, but you've already increased engagement and learning. So ask them, what can you do at the end of this task, class, or week that you couldn't do at the start? And the students can think this. They can reflect. They can write it down. They can share it with a partner. They can share it with you, whatever works. Then ask them, how did they get there? What felt good to them? And there's no right or wrong answers. They'll all have their own ways. And what felt more challenging? So again, you're kind of almost reactivating schema. You're asking them to reflect. It's also incredibly useful as a teacher because when you hear what they felt was challenging, you need to go and reflect and think, how can I present that differently next time? So if you have kind of spent this presentation writing your shopping list or planning dinner and you don't remember anything, remember this slide. Take a screenshot or write it down. It just works. I've seen it work time and time again. Okay, so time for a little checklist, guys. I'll move on, but I can go back to any slide if you ask at the end. So start with the ILOs. Make sure you're activating schema. Offer choice in the task type, in how they show learning. Make the learning as visible as you can. And just then you reflect at the end about what worked and what didn't. Because if the students were not engaged at all, that's not a failed lesson. It's only a failed lesson if you don't reflect and do something different next time. And sometimes people are just having a bad day as well. So there's no such thing as a failed lesson, except if you don't reflect yourself as a teacher. Okay. I just, the faces, I can only see some of your faces, but I can see really, really beautiful smiling faces, which is what keeps me going. I'll tell you a little bit about Emerald. So I work at this beautiful, you can see how beautiful the school is. In front of the school, there's a huge park where I used to take my eldest when she was a little baby. Beautiful park for the students to walk around in. At the back, there's an enormous garden where students hang out. There's a winter garden for the Irish weather. There's a big canteen, and we find all of these elements of our school are equally as important as to the courses we offer, because it's a nurturing, warm environment where they connect with each other. Our English and professional development courses are research-based. They are hands-on. We encourage cultural immersion and real classroom takeaways. Like even today, ultimately, I've probably been talking for about 20 minutes. I really committed to trying to give you something you can take away, something simple. And we are accredited by Equals and QQI, which are two huge bodies. QQI is the Irish body, and Equals, you may have heard of them. We do a range of Erasmus Plus courses, and I'll let you have a little look there. And that's my doorbell going, so I'm just trying to turn it off. And you can, we want to lead with warmth, we want to lead with connection, and it's not just about language for us. Okay, I'm going to stop there. Any questions? Any questions?
Well, thank you very much, Rachel. That was really, really interesting. And there's a lot to think about. I still teach also, and I think, you smart the learning outcomes at the beginning, something that we all need to remember. And then at the end of the lesson, you have that time for reflection of have you met those outcomes. So they're really helpful. So thank you very much. I'm going to send the slides out to everybody, and there is a recording of this if you'd like a recap. So Rachel, thank you very much. Thank you to everybody who joined. And if you have any interest in Emerald Cultural Institute or any other of the centres within Erasmus Courses Ireland, or you're keen to learn about any way that we could help you develop your Erasmus projects within your centres, then please don't hesitate to contact us. Okay. Have a lovely evening, everybody.
Absolute pleasure to meet you all today.
Great. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to end the recording and end the meeting now.
Thank you.